And while our next presenter is setting up, I'm just going to also mention that we obviously have a day full of programs for you. We have also, in parallel to our presentations in different faculties, you can also hear from the DCU students themselves. We have a separate strand of presentations on the student perspective. We also have presentations about clubs and societies, and various other information sessions. All of those can be found on the Virtual Open Day Hub on the DCU website. So if you just go to dcu.ie, you can find all of those things there. Meanwhile, I will also remind you that we will also be fielding a lot more questions and answers. So from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., we will also have dedicated question and answer sessions in Pubble, and links to those can also be found on the Virtual Open Day Hub that is on the DCU website. But as we go from program to program, obviously also pop your questions into the question and answer box that is at the bottom of the screen for you. And we'll make sure to take and answer as many questions as we can. So our next presenter is Martin Maloney, who represents the School of Communications. Martin has been with the school for many, many years and is a GCU veteran. So he is very much kind of a wealth of knowledge, really, and he knows probably all there is to know about DCU to this day. So Martin's going to take us through the offerings from the School of Communications. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tanya. I was wondering what way you were going to put it when you said I was here for so long. But anyway, those of you who know DCU may know its history, and it started with a building in 1838. I haven't been here quite that long, but sometimes it just feels like that. Hello and welcome to an overview of the School of Communications, and in particular, our 3 undergraduate programs in communications, in journalism, and in multimedia. Now, I'm just going to reshare those slides. Apologies, because I'm not sure that I have shared them correctly. I was distracted with Tanya saying I was here for so long. Now that's better. This will allow me to share the sound with you as well as the slides. So it's a School of Communications, and we're actually ranked amongst the top 200 schools of communications in the world, which is no mean feat indeed. And of course, many of you will be aware of our graduates that you come across in the public domain in one way or another. I'll talk about those in a few minutes. We're based on the Glasnevin campus, which is one of 3 campuses you know that DCU is based on. And we're particularly lucky in that we are located, our building is next door to the Helix, and you'll be very familiar with the Helix. And we got news recently that the Panto will go on at the Helix this year, albeit online. But it's very exciting to be based beside that building. But also it is often the center of where many of our graduates perform or at conferences, or and we're very much aware that its physical presence to us is also an important part of what we do in very many ways. But although you'll be interested today in the undergraduate programs and coming to do a degree in the School of Communications, part of what we do and our staff is about research and involvement in society generally. And you'll find that a lot of government advisory boards and expert panels are filled with people across across the campus in DCU. But in the School of Communications, we find ourselves involved in national broadcasting, in various media outlets, and on expert panels of one kind or another. And it's an important part of what we do within the school and indeed within the university. You'll find that the people you have teaching you in class are the people who are asked for their expert knowledge in various ways, and also that they are the people who are writing the textbooks and developing policies and researching in new ground in the area that you're studying. So it means you're getting it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, which is always good. And you know that material that they're talking about in the classroom today will end up being published and read by other people later on. So you have the inside track, as it were. You'll also be familiar with many of the graduates of the School of Communications, many of whom are highlighted in media circles, in entertainment, and but not only the ones you would obviously think of, they're also involved in government, in politics, and public relations. And very many of our graduates are responsible for the entertainment and the media you consume, but you mightn't see them. So they're involved in producers, directors, editors, policymakers of one kind or another. And we're very lucky that our graduates have ended up in very successful and influential positions right across Irish life, and indeed across Europe and further afield. So we have 3 degree programs at the School of Communications: one in communication studies, one in journalism, and one in multimedia. And I'm going to talk about the 3 of them in turn. But first of all, I just want to mention the commonalities of the 3, what they have in common. They're all level 8 honours degrees. They all last 3 years, and each of them offers various entry routes to get into the degree. So you can come in from the Leaving Certificate with the CAO in the normal way, but also we encourage a range of other routes in through the DEAR and HARE and the HERE and DARE programs even, but also international applicants, mature applicants, and those that might come in having done a FETAC course. So we believe that the mixture of students in our classrooms is very important. So whilst the majority of our students would come from doing their Leaving Certificate, getting the points and coming in the front doors, as it were, we really like to encourage applications and students in our classrooms from a wide variety of backgrounds. And the way to do that is to have these different entry routes. And all 3 of our degrees do that. The other aspect is that all of these programs, although they're academic degrees, each of them have practical application in those ways. If you're studying journalism, you will study the journalism skills subjects, but also you'll have studied the policy of media and the development of journalism thinking. And we try and have that balance across all 3 programs. And it's very important that you understand what happens within the career in which you find yourself. The other aspect then is related to that, and it applies to the way we have our students being taught and how they learn. And not only have we exams, but there's a great deal of project work, a great deal of applied work in the learning. And that goes with the theory and practice I mentioned earlier. And the third thing that each of these programs has in common is the fact that although we have a set of modules or subjects that every student has to do, as you go through each of these programs, you find more and more choices as to which modules you want to do. And very often students are told in 2nd and 3rd year, you can pick 3 of these 5 modules or 2 of these 4. And so although you'll graduate alongside a classmate who's done the same degree, you may find that you've been able to tailor yours to your own skill set, or perhaps the direction which you want to go afterwards. And your colleague will have done something slightly different. So that's very important to us, that there is a tailoring within each degree, and we've managed that across the 3 of them. So let's take a look at each program then in turn. And first of all, we'll take a look at the Communication Studies program. Excuse me. As you can see, the points have settled just around 400. And it's similar enough across our 3 programs, as you'll see in a moment. But the Communication Studies degree allows students to study the role of communication in all its facets, in interpersonal communication, the kind of thing you and I are having now, but also in the media, looking at journalism, in advertising, in public relations, looking at intercultural communication, how different societies communicate. So it's communications in all its forms, including film and television. And they have their core subjects, obviously, which are around psychology and communication studies and communication theory and linguistics, indeed. But also they then might share some of the subjects with the students from our other 2 programs, journalism and multimedia, where they get an insight into their worlds. The Communication Studies degree is the broadest of these 3 programs. If you have an interest in communications and the media, but you're not sure that you want to be a journalist, or you're unsure if you want to get so involved in the production side of communications involving computers, which would be multimedia, then the communications program is the best one for you in that case. It keeps your options open. And very often people would do a communications degree and then find that they have a passion for a particular aspect of communications, perhaps public relations, perhaps journalism, perhaps they have a liking for science. So they do a science communication master's afterwards, or if it's public relations, they can do public relations masters, or maybe they want to step over to the business side of things and they do a marketing degree with the fundamentals of communications underneath that. So the communications one is the broadest one and gives you the most opportunity, but it's still focused on communications and the media and within those areas. Let's hear it from one of the communications students themselves. They'll probably tell you better than I will.
My name is Oisin Walsh, and I'm a musician and a full-time intern in the Catholic Communications Office in St. Patrick's College, Maynooth. Communications helped me to express my own ideas and take what I learned from class and apply it to my own life. So whether it be a photograph, an essay, a short story, or the spoken word, I was able to think for myself. What I found most interesting was that balance between practical production and the theoretical stuff, because I'd be a bit of a nerd when it comes to theories and complex ideas, but then being able to, express yourself and make something you're proud of, whether it be a video or photography project, is great to have when you're leaving. If a student's thinking of doing communications, I suppose the most important thing is to have your own ideas and don't be afraid to express them, because that's exactly what the course is. You're learning to communicate your ideas in the most clear and succinct way possible, using a whole lot of ways to do it.
So you get it from the horse's mouth there about communication studies. Let's take a look at the second of our programs. Excuse me, journalism. Again, you can see the range of points, the cut-off points for entry to this program is more or less in line with the communication studies program, and so is the multimedia. They're of a muchness. An important aspect to note is that across these three programs, all of them have a minimum entry requirement that you must have a H4 in higher English. And not only is it your use of English to communicate, but also you need that level of English in order to read around the subject and to get a good understanding of it. So it's important that you have that. Without the H4 in higher English, you won't gain entry regardless. Journalism program has been running since 1982 in DCU. And it is an interesting combination of the practical skills of journalism and also academic subjects that allow students to develop and understand the world and understand areas that would relate to journalism. So as well as the practical skills of feature writing and news reporting and media law, alongside those, students develop skills and knowledge in areas like ethics, politics, law. So they understand the world around them, and so will be better journalists to be able to explain it, understand it, and then communicate with the rest of us as that. It's important also to note that the journalism program caters for journalism of all kinds: print journalism, broadcast, both television and radio, and also online journalism. The principles are very much the same, as you can imagine, but we're aware that students will enter a variety of these fora. So it's important that we prepare them to be competent in each of those areas. And as you may have known already, that you see our graduates of this program doing very well across print, broadcast, online, and continue to do so. And that's been a very important aspect. Another important aspect of this particular program is an 8-week work placement, which happens at the end of the 3 years. And we're lucky in that we have long-standing relationships with a wide range of media, print, broadcast, and online, where previous students have got on very well in the work placement, and many indeed have found themselves with careers in those very same employers. But more importantly, the relationships are ongoing, so that for you as a student coming in, whether it's the Irish Times or RTE or the Donegal Democrat or the Kilkenny People, they will come to us and say, the last students you gave us were very good, what have you got? And it's in those 8 weeks that the journalism students learn to apply what they have learned in the classroom and also have practiced in their practical work. So although they're coming into the workplace for the first time in their work placement, it isn't the first time they'll have practiced journalism. And that's very important about this program, that the bridge between the classroom and the workplace is a very firm one, and one that's practiced throughout the 3 years. Let's hear it directly from one of the journalism students then, shall we?
My name is Shauna Bowers, and I'm currently a journalist at the Irish edition of The Times and The Sunday Times. As was drummed into me during my time here in DCU, journalism is the gatekeeper of democracy. Like, the amount of stories that cause actions when they're written about. For example, I've written a story about disabled interns in the Dáil, despite the fact that the Dáil has a policy against unpaid internships. Like, all these things go unnoticed if journalists aren't there to draw attention to them. I loved it. I actually did. But I think I loved it more so because I did get involved in the College View, the student newspaper. Like you learn hands-on real life experience while still being in the comfort of university life. So, you know, you get all the fun without all the responsibility, so to speak.
All the fun without the responsibility. I don't know that we would promote that as a good way to learn, but I know what you mean. And now let's take a look at the third program, the BSc in Multimedia. And this is essentially like the communications degree, but it's very much applied to the production area. So it's communicating using digital technologies. I suppose it's most obviously seen in the area of social media now. So these students still take an academic level 8 honours degree. They will still study the theories of communication. They will have an understanding of how humans communicate, both interpersonally, like you and I, or societies. They'll understand how the media works. They'll understand how that's all been developed. But they will have spent much of their time in class working as to how they can communicate that in the modern world, electronically, digitally. And they will use audio, video, text, and imaging, pictures. They use all those together in some combination, which is where the name comes from, multimedia. They use them in combination to tell a story or to persuade someone to do something, to communicate effectively in one way or another. Now, you don't have to have skills in computers to start this program, but you should be comfortable in that area. And certainly, if you don't like computers, it's not the program for you. But it's very much similar to our other two programs in that it is of academic standard. It's challenging in that respect, but you do get to be more creative in a digital space than you would with our other two programs. What's been interesting about this program is that when we first started it, we assumed that the majority of graduates would go into production areas and they would be responsible for producing this digital material. And that has been the case. But what also surprised us was that we found that the students, the graduates rather, from the multimedia program were going into non-tech areas. They were going into banking, into insurance, into government. And we looked at it and realized that nowadays, each of those areas, non-tech areas like government or banking or whatever, they needed people who were digitally savvy, who knew how to communicate in the digital world. And so they very often had someone within their own organization to create the content, but also to liaise with advertising agencies, to liaise with other providers of the content so that they could understand. And this is often where our graduates have excelled, because they have the academic background to think about the concepts, to understand the theory, and they also have the practical application to produce the material to do the communicating. And this is something that has distinguished this multimedia program from other programs in other universities. You'll find in other universities and colleges, the multimedia program tends to be based in the School of Computing, which means that those graduates are very good at producing the content, but they lack very often the understanding of communications that our graduates have, because our multimedia program is based in the School of Communications. And so our students will have studied alongside communications and journalism students. They get the broader picture, as it were. They understand the concepts. So then when they produce the content, it's much more effective for that reason. And that's been remarked upon, indeed, by many of the employers down the years who have said that. And they've regarded them as problem solvers, which really is an excellent way to represent yourself and a great thing to have on your CV. Let's hear from one of the multimedia students about the program.
My name is Mary Liz McGrath and I'm a tech consulting analyst with Deloitte. I chose to study multimedia because I felt like I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something creative and that also combined more technical skills. So it seemed like the perfect combination of those two for me. You got to take an interest in people throughout the course as well. Be like, oh, what are you working on in your spare time? Or like stay back after class and see like what are people doing, and like yeah, you just get to know people better. You get to know their style. When I was going for the job, they asked me extensively about what I had done in my undergrad and about my final year project in particular, and had to go through all the stages that we went through in the process of delivering that final project. And I think that they were really impressed at the breadth of our skill set coming out of multimedia.
So that's it again, the first-hand experience of one of our multimedia students. The school itself is based in the Henry Grattan building, and we're very fortunate in that we are very well equipped. We have a mixture of Mac computers and PCs, and as those two operating systems have developed over the years, they've now become closer together, and so people can move from one to the other with less difficulty than they used to be able to do. But Macs are still very important in the world of graphics and broadcasting. We have 2 radio studios just recently renovated, and I don't know if you can hear the builders, but the television studio is nearly finished its renovation, and it should be ready for the new year. So we're very lucky to have these kind of facilities at such a high level. They're all broadcast quality for producing high level and high quality material. For those of you who are interested in the particular technologies, if you're nerdy at all like that, this will give you an idea of the kind of software and hardware we use for our teaching and learning. And of course, as many students have discovered, what you can do now with an iPhone or indeed an Android device is often of broadcast quality. And part of what you'll experience today on television is created with material, with equipment, which is fairly ordinary in many ways. So that gap between what we have personally and what professionals have has narrowed a great deal, and so have the way in which they're used. So we're glad to be able to encourage students in that way. And as I say, if you're interested in the level of technology and equipment, this information might be of interest to you. Within the school, as well as the 3 undergraduate programs that I've mentioned, we also offer a range of postgraduate programs. And you'll see from this list that these are areas that are more specialized than our undergraduate programs. So they take an area of communications, perhaps, and then specialize down within it. For example, the Masters in Public Relations and Strategic Communications, or indeed the first item on the list there, the Climate Change Policy Program. And it looks at how society is reacting to climate change, how we can communicate it more effectively, how we can get messages across, and then how we can understand what people think. And I suppose it's a very good example of the importance of communications. There are aspects of our lives that are changing. Indeed, the very experience of COVID over the last 8 months has shown us how much our lives can change through circumstances outside our control. But one of the most important things throughout the COVID period has been communication. From the very first time that Leo Varadkar had that speech in March, where we all thought we were just going to be impacted for a couple of weeks, a long time ago. From then, right up to the nightly broadcasts on RTE, where we have the latest figures and people are trying to understand, and the myriad of articles in our newspapers, where we struggle to try and predict what's going to happen, what we should be doing, where different groups represent their circumstances and say, well, we should be able to do this if someone else is able to do that. And then trying to communicate both to those groups and understand their needs. All of that has a home in the School of Communications. And it just underlines the importance of communications in so many, many ways. Another aspect outside the school that impacts us is the role of the clubs and societies. In DCU, we have 120 clubs and societies, and you'll find that in most of those, they're very often dominated by students from the School of Communications. Many of our students are extroverts, I suppose, but some of the clubs and societies are directly related to what we do in the classroom. So the Media Production Society, things like that. But even things like the Murder, She Wrote Society and other areas like that, you'll find our students involved in that. And we very much encourage that, the interactivity between what's learned in the classroom and what's done outside. And it's very much part of the development of students throughout their time at university, not only in preparation for their career, but in preparation for their adult lives. And we very much welcome that and encourage and facilitate the link between the classroom and extracurricular time. So I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I understand my colleagues, Tanya and Madeline, will take questions that you've sent in by text and maybe put them to me. I'm very happy to answer those. I will leave this on the screen because these are the contact details for the course directors of the 3 programs, the Communication Studies degree, Journalism program, and the BSc in Multimedia. So if you want to know more, you could email these 3 colleagues, or indeed pose your question now, or maybe Tanya already has 100 questions written down to share with me.
Not 100, but we have a few, Martin. So maybe I think there's a lot of questions about work placements and various opportunities, so maybe you could highlight those specifically for the 3 communications courses, and then talk more about, I think, the balance between hands-on work and academic work.
Okay. Well, in relation to the work placement in DCU, we call it intra. It's a formal name for that, and because it shows that when it's intra, it's part and parcel of your degree program, and you get marks for it. Of the 3 undergraduate degrees at the moment, journalism is the only one of the 3 which has a formal part of the program that is marked for assessment as part of its work placement. In the past, the other 2 degrees down the years have had it, and for one reason or another, we had to let it go as a formal part of the program, partly because each of these degrees is only 3 years, and you have an awful lot to do in 3 years. You'll find other degree programs are 4 years, and there's more capacity for that sort of thing. That said, we encourage students in their downtime and maybe in part-time job to get involved in working in the area in which they're studying. And we find frequently that we have students who are writing some freelance articles, or perhaps they're doing some broadcasting in community radio stations, and indeed our own radio stations here in DCU, and indeed our television service, both of which I should have mentioned, as part of the clubs and societies. And it's something we support for that. In the journalism one, for example, there's one module where students can opt to be assessed in their practical journalism as part of that. It's a portfolio module, as well as their intra-placement. The other aspect, I suppose, of that in journalism is that students have news days where they spend the entire day as if they're working for the Irish Times or the Clare Echo or whatever it is, that they will go through it that day in real time with a working journalist who will put them through the paces as editor. And then the other thing you mentioned, Tanya, was about the practical aspect and the academic aspect, I think. We very much strive to have those 2 interlinked. So when students learn something in the classroom, first of all, very few of our subjects are assessed by examination. There are some that necessarily, but most of our assessment is through project work. And that way, when you do, be it a project or an essay or an assignment, when you do it, you learn more about what you've heard in the classroom. And then secondly, the feedback from your teacher, your lecturer, is able to help you to develop that skill set. So straight away in the classroom, there's the link between the theory and the practice. But then as well as that, we would make connections with things you're doing outside. And the other aspect to mention is that if you look at our staff list, and please go to our website and have a look down the staff list, you'll see that the vast majority of our teachers, our lecturers, have been practitioners, and many continue to be practitioners in different ways. They may have been journalists or editors and so forth, but they also have maybe been policymakers, or they're helping to develop social media protections or whatever it is, but they're out there doing the thing they're telling you about in the classroom. So the idea of a distinction between this is the classroom and this is the real world, it's not something we subscribe to in DCU, and the School of Communications is a great place to be able to show that. Were there any other questions, Tanya, that you couldn't answer? I know some of them you and Madeline were answering directly.
Yeah, I think actually really maybe an interesting point to address, which I think students often have, is the question of why do points go up and down every year? And I guess that's not specific to communications, but it's a question that comes up again and again.
Well, actually, I was involved in that for many years. At the 14th of August, I would stand in a room and be party to this system. And the first thing to say is we don't set the points. So we don't even know what the points are going to be. If I knew what the points were going to be, I'd be down at Paddy Power Bookmaker placing a large bet now, to get the inside story. But it's supply and demand, strangely enough. In each of our programs, we have a class size, and we've increased that class size in recent years. So in communications, there are 100 places, almost 100 places. That was 60 places a few years ago. And it means if we can accommodate more people, that when we rank order all the students in August, it means we can go further down the list, which means that the further down the list we go, the lower the points. So we've been able to bring the points down because we can accommodate more students. That's, that aspect. But it may happen from time to time that journalism becomes particularly popular. So more students apply, and the students that apply happen to do better in their leaving certificate. So when we pick the first 30 students, they happen to be on higher points than last year's first 30 students, but very much about supply and demand. What I would say to students is this, and it's important. Have a plan A. If you want to do nuclear physics and you really want to do it, great, put that down number one. And if you don't get nuclear physics, if you want to be, I don't know, a truck driver, number two, and you want to be a lawyer, number three, they're the things you should put down in order. The system will look after you. Don't ever try and think, oh, well, I won't get the points. Because every year we have students that we meet who say, well, I didn't apply because I didn't think I get the points. Very important. Always put down your choice of what you would like. And then the other very important advice is have a plan B. If I don't get this choice, will I be happy in that? If I don't get that choice, and then have I a free tag course I could do? Is there some other alternative? But don't ever write yourself off in advance. Don't say I won't get those points, because I've seen points change dramatically in a particular year and students are left out.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Maybe just a short question while we wrap up and move to the next speaker. How easy is it to get a job after doing an undergraduate degree, or do you necessarily have to do a master's in this area?
Depending on the area. And for example, the area I'd be most familiar with is public relations. And increasingly now, public relations agencies expect people to have a master's, you know, as this sort of academic inflation down the years, people now are expected to be more and more educated. So that happens. It's not impossible to do well from an undergraduate degree, but increasingly within certain areas, it's expected. The journalism degree, I would say not. That if you have an undergraduate journalism degree, you will work in journalism without any difficulty and without needing a further qualification. Some people would like to specialize. So perhaps after doing their journalism degree, they might go and do a postgraduate degree in sports journalism, for example. There's none in Ireland, there's one in London. And you can do things like that. But for most of the time, people are leaving programs like journalism with their intellectual development and the set of practical skills they need to be an effective contributor to any workforce. So the people in journalism tend to go straight on. Communications, because it's such a broad degree, they have more opportunities. So I wouldn't see it that they need to have a postgrad, but it means they have an opportunity. So they could then tweak it like that. But again, the vast majority of the communication students go on to form their careers without having a postgraduate qualification.